Welcome, Pascal. Glad you could join
Hi.
us. Hi.
Hi, thanks for
We
inviting me.
haven't. I'm glad you could be here. We're in some mutual kind of chat groups in the background. We've never talked in person, so it's very nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us today. And you had an interesting week this week. You put up in the Journal de Montréal. Uh,
Yeah, I made many enemies, but also many great allies, I think.
Wonderful. Do you need permission to share the screen? Do you have a presentation or
Yeah, I do have a PowerPoint.
okay, so give me a second. I'm going to extend that to you.
Okay.
Uh,
And can you hear me well?
your audio is great.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay. So it looks like I have the right settings. Oh, I don't want to share. I want you to share. Let's try that. There you go. So I'm going to watch the chat and the Q&A. So if people have questions and you want to type them in at the right time, I'll bring them up for Pascal.
I don't see where I have to click to share my PowerPoint, though.
So bottom of the screen, the share screen. Do you have that button?
Oh, yes, okay, I just found it. Okay, sorry.
Perfect.
Getting there. Um, okay. So, hello everyone. Thanks for inviting me. So through my journey as a teacher, lecturer, and doctoral student, I've witnessed firsthand the evolving landscape of education. And I've been invited today to share my thoughts on what I call the dangerous rise of critical pedagogy. And there is a lot to unpack, so I will start right away. And my presentation overlaps what Shannon presented, but I'm gonna talk about critical pedagogy from a more theoretical point of view, since this is my field of expertise. So critical pedagogy is gaining in popularity. It's now taking root in our schools, teacher training programs, and government education policies. And it used to be considered quite radical, but it seems to be increasingly accepted as sort of the natural extension of the progressive orientation attributed to education over the past decades. So towards the end of my presentation, I will briefly discuss why I believe the current educational context makes this approach so attractive to educators. But first of all, what is critical pedagogy? It was first theorized in the US in the 1970s by widely known Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, along with other key figures such as Henri Giroux, Peter McLaren, and Bell Hooks. And it now overlaps with wokeism, and it takes on different guises. So it can be feminist, anti-racist, anti-oppressive, decolonial, queer, but it all shares the same Marxist grid of analysis of reality it borrows from critical theory. And its first claim is that society is oppressive, and that all inequalities and injustices are the result of hidden systems of oppression that need to be revealed to us so that we can be empowered to revolutionize society. So this is the only knowledge that we need to, in order to be free, according to critical pedagogues. So this is the knowledge that will be passed on to students in schools. And this claim is always presented as self-evident, or it's supported by what I call pseudoscience, because it comes from research conducted by openly activist researchers adopting what I call a woke epistemological posture. So the dice are loaded from the start, from the way in which the problem of the research is formulated, to the research question itself, to the way in which participants are recruited, right through the interpretation of the data. It is designed to always confirm the initial claim. So it's sort of phrased and framed in a way that it makes it irrefutable. And it gets mixed up with other research. It's published in academic journals, in scientific journals. So you have to be aware of those sources because they are ideologically driven, and it gives the impression that the claim is supported by research, but really it's not. Oops. Okay, so before we get any further, there's one thing that I really wanted to address in this presentation, and is what we mean by oppression and by social justice in critical pedagogy, because that's what we're claiming to fight against oppression, and we're claiming to make society more just. So what are we talking about exactly when we speak about oppression? I think it's important to really understand that. So first, it's useful to point out that critical pedagogy is rooted in critical theory, which is a Marxist-inspired approach to philosophy that posits that societies are based on ideology, defined as the dominant systems of values, beliefs, attitudes, preferences, and structures. So what is implied here is that those dominant norms and standards are arbitrary. They have absolutely no objective or universal value, and they are imposed on us by the dominant group, wishing to maintain their privilege and power over the marginalized groups. So we're basically equating any set of norms or standards, values or expectations set by the so-called dominant group as oppression. To be oppressed is to be expected the standards, the norms and expectations of the dominant group. So what is widely accepted, basically, to be expected to share their beliefs, attitudes, and goals, and so on. So the idea that some values or standards are objectively and universally good and desirable is challenged here. For example, punctuality and attendance are associated with Eurocentrism, white supremacy, colonialism. So as an educator, to expect Black, Latino, Indigenous students to attend class and to arrive on time is considered oppressive, because you are imposing a white supremacist, colonialist frame of reference on them. So it's not objectively and universally desirable that students attend class and arrive on time. It's oppressive to expect that. So to achieve justice, the norms and standards set by the dominant group, the norms and standards that are widely accepted in society, must be removed. So you will probably encounter this picture often, and it shows what we mean by social justice quite clearly. So just picture the gray fence as a standard that is widely accepted. In education, this could be the degree of mastery of content required to pass a standardized test. So the first picture shows that in reality, some people exceed the standard, others barely meet it, as others are not even invited to compete to take the test. For a while, our educational system was aiming at equality of access, equality of opportunity, which meant that everyone was offered the same basic quality education, regardless of sex, race, class, or religion. And meritocracy implied that everyone could advance according to their capabilities, their talent, and their will. So this is what the second picture suggests. And if we stick with the standardized test example, well, it means that everyone gets a chance to pass the same test after receiving the same education. And of course, here we accept the fact that in the end, the outcome will be different for everyone, for all different sorts of reasons. Equity suggests that in order to achieve equality of outcome, which became the goal over the course of the 20th century, the deficits at the root of inequalities must be overcome by compensatory measures. So here, unequal treatment, more support for those who need it, is deemed fair. But that's not enough for social justice warriors. In fact, more and more we're saying that asserting that inequality stems from a deficit is in itself discriminatory and oppressive, because something is considered to be in deficit only by virtue of an established criterion. So what social justice is, therefore, is the abolition of the standard. If there's no standard to be met, well, nobody will be disadvantaged, discriminated against for not meeting the standard. So that way it is believed that we are removing systemic barriers to success. We believe that we're removing the cause of the inequality. But of course, there's no need to explain why this is absolutely preposterous and wishful thinking. If we abolish the standard by which we assess health, for instance, an obese person or an ill person will not magically become objectively healthy. So to stick with the standardized test example, if boys get higher scores than girls in math test, well, we should not try to find ways to help girls get a better score. We should conclude instead that the test is sexist and must remove it. If racialized or disabled students are more likely to get suspended from school, well, it means that the school policies are racist and ableist. So we should abolish those policies. I even found a book where it is said that abolition is love. The second claim is that education is never neutral. It's always political. So an education that does not actively engage in the fight against inequalities and injustices is an education that is complicit in the systems of domination that perpetuate them. So we can't just keep teaching the way we always have just because we believe our teaching isn't racist or oppressive. There's no such thing as not racist according to critical pedagogues. You have to be actively anti-racist, anti-oppression. So education becomes a tool for social justice. Otherwise, it means it's a tool for oppression. So you are either with me or against me here. Education has to be actively seeking to reveal and challenge hidden forms of oppression to students. That becomes the priority. And by doing so, we claim that we empower educators and students to become active agents for social change, which is the goal. The goal is revolution. So that's the only way we can be free. And that's the only knowledge that you need to be free. It's the knowledge of those systems of oppression. So in other words, we're saying that we want to turn educators into activists who will in turn turn students into activists. So how are we going to achieve that? First, we're going to build an inclusive curriculum because we need to challenge the dominant narratives and we need to abolish those norms, values, and standards that come from the dominant group. But don't be naive. It's not just about including diversity into the curriculum. We want marginality to become the new norm, because by abolishing the norms, the new norm is the absence of norm. Marginality becomes the norm that we are wishing to embrace. So everything becomes normal, apart, of course, from the norms that we currently think as normal. So the curriculum should not reflect reality as it is, including the diversity that we find in it. Instead, it should reflect what reality could be if only we were truly free from oppression. So by the same token, we end up over-representing the marginals in the curriculum while delegitimizing the dominant group. If you take a look at the resources available, you will quickly notice that the members of the dominant group are mostly erased from the picture. You won't find any cis heterosexual white couples, for instance, in the kids' books and all the pedagogical material. We're suggesting that there's no objective reason for reality to be the way it is. There's no objective reason for the vast majority of people to be cis and heterosexual. In fact, the only reason it is so is that hetero-cis normativity was imposed on us, repressing our creativity and depriving us from the freedom to be queer. So that's what we have to unlearn here. Queer pedagogy even demands that educators enter their classroom expecting each child to be queer. So we are promoting queerness here. We want children to interiorize the idea that the current norms are oppressive, or at the very least, that they are boring and dull, and that to be free is to transgress those norms. You just have to take a look at the straight flag and the cisgender flag, and you'll notice that it's black, white, and gray. It has no color. So what child would choose that flag over the colorful ones? This is boring. Surely we can do better than this. So the message here is that to be queer is to be free, and it's more fun and it's more creative. Second, we are explicitly hijacking instruction to serve a political agenda. So academic disciplines that are still taught at school today will become a pretext to discuss power dynamics, inequalities, and injustices. And of course, the goal will never be to acquire knowledge, to gain a deeper understanding of subject matter, because that very standard is oppressive. So, and we don't even care to gain knowledge and understanding of the complex issues we wish to address here. The goal really is indoctrination. We want your children to interiorize this ideological way of understanding reality and to recognize it as the truth. And remember, that's the only knowledge that they need to be turned into little puppet activists for their activist educators. So you will find all sorts of activities around racism, oppression, and hatred online that can be used in the context of all academic disciplines: history, literature, grammar, mathematics, arts, physical education. All those disciplines are seen as opportunities to speak about social justice. So this one I found on Teachers Pay Teachers, and it really encapsulates what I just said. The learning activity doesn't involve students demonstrating their understanding of a subject they've been taught. The activity involves creating an attractive poster that features a powerful anti-racist, anti-oppression slogan. So we are asking children to take a political stand on complex social issues that they don't fully understand and about which they haven't been taught anything apart from the usual ideological stuff. There's no room for open inquiry on the topic. There's no room for diversity of viewpoints. The teachers don't provide students with complete, nuanced, and accurate information. Of course, it all leads to ideological conformity. So instead of focusing on teaching students that 2 + 2 = 4, which would be imposing a white supremacist standard, because the right answer is a standard, is a white supremacist standard, apparently. Critical pedagogues should instead use math class to identify and challenge the ways that math is used to uphold capitalist, imperialist, and racist views. Sounds fun. So third, what we're going to do also is that we're going to make sure that dialogue and diversity of viewpoints is impossible. Any point of view that questions the dogma will be easily disqualified, as it reflects a refusal to recognize the forms of oppression in society and at school, either to maintain one's privilege as a member of the dominant group, or because one has internalized too much the frame of reference from the dominant group. So divergent points of view will be quickly characterized as personal attacks on the marginalized. And so the marginals will be able to say that they don't feel safe, and diversity of viewpoints or dissent will be seen quickly as hate speech. What's more, since the standpoint theory, which is a theory that was popularized by bell hooks, that suggests that marginalized people benefit from an epistemological privilege that gives them access to a certain knowledge of reality to which the dominant do not have access, while the dominant's perspective will be quickly delegitimized, and members of the dominant group are either reduced to silence or they are invited to repeat pre-made discourse that good allies must adopt. So we claim that we are fostering open dialogue and diversity of viewpoint, but really we are not. Because for real dialogue to be possible, well, both parties must be considered equal. They must be equal in intelligence, in good faith, and each party must consider the other's point of view as legitimate or at least worthy of consideration. And this is clearly not the case here. And finally, well, we will create a climate of surveillance, accusation, and censorship. Students and educators will be expected to constantly scrutinize their own and others' language, feelings, and behaviors. There will be an ongoing emphasis on identifying signs of oppression, aggression, and microaggressions. And an example of a microaggression is simply asking someone where they're from or complimenting a Black woman for her hair. So this becomes oppressive and hateful and racist. So this can lead to heightened anxiety, guilt, and self-censorship as individuals fear reprimand or social ostracism. And it fosters a climate where individuals feel compelled to report perceived transgressions, aggressions, and microaggressions, leading to a culture of accusation and suspicion. So surely this is not what we're looking for in a non-totalitarian society. So how did we get there? It's a long story, but let's just say that the ground was already fertile for this kind of ideology to take root and spread. At the turn of the 20th century, we experienced a first paradigm shift from knowledge-centered education to child-centered education. So we already broke away from an education focusing on instruction, on academic rigor, on discipline and intellectual achievement. So this, if this is still how you conceive of education, just know that it's already considered dated, and it has been for a while now at least in our faculties of education. So child-centered education focuses on the child's interests and needs, So the child becomes the standard by which success is measured. Children don't have to be elevated to meet standards that are set by adults anymore. They don't achieve autonomy and freedom through hard work. They are already autonomous and free, and education must respect, protect, and cultivate those natural qualities. And personal growth becomes more important than academic success and mastery of content. Social and emotional learning takes precedence over the quest for truth and the exercise of rationality. The teacher is no longer a knowledgeable and experienced authority figure responsible for passing on knowledge to the next generation. The teacher is seen as a guide, a facilitator, supporting students in their learning journey. So since critical pedagogy appeals to emotion, to kindness, but also to guilt, and of course, we don't want to be oppressive, we don't want to be unkind, we don't want to be unjust. And critical pedagogy and wokeism is asking us to be kind. Isn't it just kind to use someone's preferred pronouns and to allow children to choose the gender they want to be? So child-centered educators, which is the current paradigm, child-centered education, well, they are already sensitive to the child's needs, emotion, well-being. So we can understand that they can easily be compelled by the values promoted by critical pedagogy. They already believe that knowledge-centered education was unjust, authoritarian, elitist, and so on. And the other thing is that in our universities today, in our faculties of education, this is what I published earlier this week. It's the embarrassing fact that our students in education are mostly quite mediocre, and they're not well read, they're not knowledgeable because they have been they received that child-centered education from elementary to all the way through university, focusing on their well-being. So, and when they arrive in our faculties of education, well, they are not offered teacher training that will alleviate their knowledge, cultural, and language deficits. Quite the contrary. To be honest, all of this makes them all the more susceptible to this ideological content. They bite into critical pedagogy because they are not even equipped to criticize it. So that's a vicious circle here. So what should we do? To be honest, I'm not really optimistic about our public institutions. I don't know that the public educational system and our universities can be salvaged because it's so dominant in our universities at the moment, and it's gaining popularity among students in education training programs, and it's already informing new laws and policies. So I don't know if we can change that from the inside, but nevertheless, I believe that we must express our concerns and dissent and never apologize for doing so. That's really important. But if worst comes to worst, I think we have to be ready to take our children out of school, and we have to participate in the creation of alternatives. Homeschooling with other concerned parents, sharing your values can be an option. I know that's not necessarily easy to do, but I certainly am considering this for my 4-year-old daughter. She's starting school next fall. And if I see any signs of this at her schools, that's it. She's out and I'm going to homeschool her for sure. Private school, which can still have more conservative values, can be an option. But on the bright side, I see schools opening up that seem to be rediscovering the value of knowledge-centered education. or even some schools are offering classical education. So I think that those alternatives really are the way forward. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pascale. That is an awful lot to take in. I know myself that I started approaching this about 3 years ago, and I had to go in little stages to be able to wrap my head around what was happening. And I know that when I ran for school trustee 2 years ago, my slogan was education, not indoctrination. But even at that time, I had no idea how deep the indoctrination goes. Um, Now we have a Q&A. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for viewers and people who are attending. I want to thank the people who joined us in the last little bit. You've been listening to Pascale Bourgeois. She's an educator's educator. Is that fair to say in Montreal?
Yeah, I don't know how to. I give lectures to the next generation of teachers at university, but maybe not for long because my colleagues didn't appreciate my article earlier this week.
Wow. Yeah, it is a fraught landscape for professionals and people willing to speak out. And I believe you're right. We have to not apologize. We have to speak out. We have to talk more amongst ourselves and be willing to talk to our family, our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends. I've got a question from Barb Hertzman. Can you advise classical education options for my child going into grade 11? Do you know of any? Now, I'm not sure where our person asking the question is from. Do you know anything about classical education schools that are popping up? I know of some in Alberta.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I didn't really look in detail, so I couldn't advise anyone on that. But surely we can find some online, and it would be good to share those links with the public also to make it more
Yeah, each province has different rules
advertised.
around this, and what some people speculate, and people on the left that I hear saying, well, all this criticism, you're gutting education so that you can make create charter schools and close down public education to privatize education, and the accusation is this is all about oppression. And in Ontario, there's no voucher system. There's no real support for parents who want to educate kids themselves. Our grassroots panel back in January, Chris Byros Fernandez talked a little bit about their efforts in the Waterloo region to inform parents about pod schooling, so cooperatives between parents. What's the landscape like in Quebec for these kinds of things, Pascale?
I'm not sure. I would have to look into it. I don't know if there are many initiatives yet. What is surprising and also alarming is that I don't think that the public really knows what's going on inside the schools. And what I noticed over the years, even as a parent, is that we used to get homeworks and exams from our kids to sign that was coming from the school, so we could see what was going on inside of the classroom, what was being taught. And it's I can't see anything anymore. They're not sending any stuff home to be looked at. They are not really willing to share what they're doing with the parents. So schools are becoming more and more I don't know how to say it, private and unwilling to share what they're doing, as if it was embarrassing. So at this point, I'm trying to share what I found out by scratching under the surface, and what I hear since I'm teaching in the Faculty of Education, but I'm not sure what's going on on the outside, but I'm interested in finding out if there are alternatives popping up around the provinces.
I have there's been a few questions come through. This one seems like it's a bit of a kind of, well, the question is from Chance. What is the relationship between this generative model and the struggle session? Isn't this essentially a sophisticated form of bullying? The way they're.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe it's because I'm French. So if you could just, what generative model
Well, I think,
talking about?
yeah, I'm not entirely sure how to. I'm reading the question literally. Um, I think there are parallels, Chance, to the way institutions are shifting with the struggle session, the kind of the forced compliance, forcing people to speak the words, this investigation culture, this culture of walking on eggshells. Um, it absolutely is a sophisticated form of bullying.
Yeah,
I've been giving some thought to modeling the bullying dynamic because like there's a lot of stuff in schools, and the way at least in Ontario that we've been able to track this is that these things have come in under the anti-bullying rubrics, a lot of them, to justify them. So it's about anti-bullying, it's about bullying prevention, it's about safety, and they smuggle this in, but really it's bullies doing this. And
absolutely.
the same dynamic of bullying in the schoolyard, where you have a bully. The bully recruits proxies. So if you think of the Mean Girls, right, you've got that kind of the head girl, you've got her posse, and then they use kind of narrative warfare against their target. So they pick a target, and guys do this too, by the way. Guys are less verbal, but you've got your bully, your proxies or your flying monkeys. You've got your target. Then there's bystanders, people who are afraid to jump in, and then occasionally there are people who step up to defend the target or to protect the person who's being bullied. And that is exactly the same dynamic that happens on the schoolyard with what we understand as the normal pattern of bullying, not the sort of framework that the woke believe bullying. That happens in bullying in workplaces. That's happening at scale institutionally now. You've got the people kind of driving the policy, and then you've got the people who are the allies who are jumping on to play the game. They pick their targets. That's if you disagree with us, then the bullying is legitimized. There are those people like us who are daring to stand up and speak about it. And what we have is a very, very well, we have a diseased society that's playing this large scale bullying game. Really quite challenging.